Hey, my name is Ryan Carter. I'm 27, and I work as a sales rep at a mid-sized tech company in Seattle. It's the kind of job where you spend your days chasing leads, staring at spreadsheets, and pretending to care about quarterly goals. My life isn't glamorous. Commute on the light rail, grab a drip coffee from the corner shop, hit the gym a couple times a week if I'm feeling motivated. I live in a one-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill. Nothing fancy, just enough space for me and my collection of half-read books on the nightstand. I'm not the guy who stands out at parties. I show up, make small talk, nurse a beer, and slip out before things get too rowdy. That's me, reliable but forgettable. That Christmas party was no different, at least at first. It was held at a trendy bar downtown, the kind with exposed brick walls, string lights shaped like snowflakes, and a playlist of holiday hits remixed into something vaguely electronic. The company had rented out the back room, and by 10 p.m., everyone was a few drinks in. Laughter echoed off the walls, people swapping stories about botched client calls and office pranks. I hung back near the edge of the crowd, checking my phone every few minutes like I had somewhere better to be. Truth was, I didn't. My plans for the night involved takeout Thai and whatever was streaming on Netflix. I was about to make my exit when I spotted her, Sophie Turner from the IT department. She was slumped over the bar, her head resting on her folded arms, her dark brown hair spilling across the polished wood like a messy curtain. Her eyes were half closed, red-rimmed, and she was nursing what looked like her third or fourth cocktail of the night. Sophie and I weren't close. We were office acquaintances at best, the kind who nodded in the break room, shared a donut on casual Fridays, or exchanged quick complaints about the boss's endless meetings. She'd helped me troubleshoot my laptop a couple times, and I'd once covered for her when she was running late. That was it. No deep conversations, no hanging out after hours. But something about the way she looked that night stopped me cold. She wasn't just drunk, she seemed broken, like the weight of the world had finally cracked her facade. The bar was emptying out, colleagues grabbing their coats, calling Ubers, wishing each other happy holidays. No one seemed to notice Sophie, or if they did, they averted their eyes and kept moving. I hesitated, my hand on the door. Walk away, I told myself. It's not your problem. She's a grown woman. She'll figure it out. Yet I couldn't. Maybe it was the holiday spirit, or maybe it was the memory of my own rough nights after my grandfather passed away a few years back. Those times when I'd sat alone in a bar, staring into a glass, wishing someone would just ask if I was okay. Whatever it was, I turned around and walked back to the bar. "Hey, Sophie," I said softly, tapping her shoulder. "You all right?" She lifted her head slowly, blinking like she was trying to focus. Her mascara had smudged a bit and her cheeks were flushed. "Ryan, yeah, I'm fine, just tired." Her voice was slurry, but there was a hitch in it, like she was holding back tears. She tried to stand, gripping the bar for support, but her knees buckled slightly. I caught her arm instinctively. "Whoa, easy. You sure you're good to get home?" "I can Uber or something," she mumbled, waving me off. But as she reached for her phone, it slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. She stared at it for a second, then let out a frustrated laugh that turned into a sob. That's when I knew I couldn't leave her like this. "Come on, I'll drive you home. It's no big deal," she protested weakly. "No, really, I'm okay." But I could see the relief in her eyes. The bartender gave me a nod of approval as I helped her gather her things, coat, purse, a half-eaten plate of appetizers abandoned on the counter. We made our way out into the crisp December night, the air biting with that Seattle chill that cuts right through your jacket. Snowflakes were starting to fall, light and lazy, dusting the sidewalks like powdered sugar. The streets were alive with holiday cheer, people in Santa hats stumbling out of bars, lights twinkling from shop windows. But it all felt distant, like we were in our own little bubble. Getting her to my car was a challenge. Sophie leaned heavily on me, her steps uneven on the slick pavement. "Sorry," she kept saying. God, this is embarrassing." "It's fine," I replied, keeping my tone light. "We've all been there." In the car, a beat-up Honda Civic I'd had since college, I buckled her in and cranked up the heat. She gave me her address, a quiet neighborhood in West Seattle about 20 minutes away. As I pulled onto the road, the radio played some soft jazz version of White Christmas, filling the silence. Sophie stared out the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. At first she was quiet, but then the words started tumbling out. Work's been insane. Deadlines everywhere. And the boss… Ugh! She trailed off, fiddling with her coat sleeve. Then, out of nowhere. Why does everything have to be so hard, Ryan? Like, all the time? I glanced over, seeing fresh tears on her cheeks. I don't know, I said honestly. But you're not alone in feeling that way. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. You don't get it. It's not just work. It's everything. We hit a red light, and in that pause, she broke down completely. Sobs shaking her shoulders, her hands covering her face. I didn't know what to do, so I just reached over and squeezed her arm gently. Hey, it's okay. Whatever it is, you can talk about it. Or not. I'm just here. The light turned green and I drove on, the city lights blurring through the windshield. Sophie eventually quieted, sniffing and leaning back in her seat. Thanks for not bailing on me, she whispered. We arrived at her house, a modest two-story on the end of Maple Street, with warm yellow light spilling from the windows. It looked cozy, like the kind of place where families gathered for holidays. I parked and helped her out, her arm slung over my shoulder, as we navigated the short path to the door. She fumbled for her keys, dropping them once, and I picked them up without a word. At the doorstep, I rang the bell instead of knocking, figuring someone inside might help. Sophie leaned against me, her head on my shoulder, and for a moment, I wondered if I'd overstepped. But then the door swung open, and everything shifted. Her mother stood there, a woman in her early 50s with silver-streaked hair and kind, worried eyes. She took one look at Sophie and gasped, "Oh, honey, thank God you're home." She pulled her daughter into a hug, then turned to me with gratitude shining in her expression. "You must be the one who brought her. Come in, please. Let me get her settled." As we stepped inside, the house enveloped me in warmth. The scent of cinnamon from a candle, the soft glow of a Christmas tree in the corner. I helped guide Sophie to the worn brown sofa, where she collapsed with a sigh, her eyes fluttering closed almost immediately. She looked so vulnerable there, like a kid who'd had too much of the world. I turned to leave, but her mother touched my arm. "Wait, please stay for a minute. I want to thank you properly." And just like that, what I thought was a simple good deed turned into something more. Little did I know, this night was just the beginning. Her mother led the way into the living room, her steps quick but careful as we maneuvered Sophie onto the sofa. The space was small and lived in, with faded floral curtains framing the windows and a stack of magazines on the coffee table. A faint hum from the refrigerator in the adjacent kitchen mixed with the soft tick of a wall clock. Sophie mumbled something incoherent as her head hit the pillow, her body curling up instinctively under the throw blanket her mom draped over her. She was out cold within seconds, her breathing evening out into a steady rhythm. I straightened up, feeling a bit awkward now that the immediate crisis was over. "She should be okay," I said quietly. "Just needs to sleep it off." Her mother nodded, wiping her hands on a dish towel she'd grabbed from the arm of a nearby chair. She was shorter than Sophie, with the same warm brown eyes, but hers carried lines of exhaustion around them, like she'd been carrying worries for far too long. "Thank you so much for bringing her home. I'm Ellen, by the way, Ellen Turner." She extended a hand and I shook it. Firm grip, but her fingers trembled just a little. "Ryan Carter," I replied. "We work together, no problem at all." Ellen glanced at Sophie again, her expression softening with a mix of love and concern. "She's been struggling, but please don't rush off. Let me at least offer you some coffee. It's the least I can do after you went out of your way like this." I hesitated. It was late and I had an early meeting tomorrow, but something in her voice, a quiet plea, made me stay. "Sure, coffee sounds good." She bustled into the kitchen and I followed, taking a seat at the small wooden table tucked in the corner. The room smelled like cinnamon and fresh-baked cookies, remnants of holiday prep maybe. A Christmas tree stood in the living room, visible from here, its lights casting a gentle glow. Ellen poured 2 mugs from a pot that was already brewing, handing one to me before sitting across from me. The steam rose between us, and for a moment, we just sat in silence, the weight of the night hanging in the air. "I don't usually do this," she said finally, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. Invite strangers in at midnight. But you didn't have to help her. Most people would have just called a cab or left her to fend for herself. I shrugged, wrapping my hands around the mug for warmth. She's a good person. I couldn't just walk away. Ellen looked down at her cup, her fingers tracing the rim. Sophie's father, my husband. He passed away 2 months ago. Heart attack. It was sudden. He collapsed right there on the front porch, coming home from work. Sophie was the one who found him. She tried CPR, called 911, everything, but it was too late. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stared at her, processing. 2 months? That was right around the time I'd noticed Sophie seeming more withdrawn at work, her smiles forced, her lunches eaten alone at her desk. But she'd never said a word. No one in the office knew. I'm so sorry, I managed, my voice low. I had no idea. She nodded, tears welling up but not falling. She doesn't talk about it. Not to me, not to anyone. She throws herself into work, stays late, takes on extra projects. And then nights like this? She goes out, drinks too much, trying to numb it, I think. I've begged her to see someone, a therapist, a support group, but she says she's fine. She's not fine. I could see the pain etched into every line of her face. This woman had lost her husband, and now she was watching her daughter unravel. That must be incredibly hard on you both, I said. Losing someone like that, it changes everything. Ellen met my eyes, searching for something, understanding maybe. It does. The house feels so empty now. We used to have family dinners, laugh about stupid things. Now it's just quiet. And Sophie? She's pulling away. I worry she'll do something reckless, or worse, just shut down completely. She's all I have left. The knot in my chest tightened. I thought about my grandfather, how his cancer had dragged on for months before he slipped away in a hospital bed. I'd been there at the end, holding his hand, feeling that helpless rage at the unfairness of it all. It wasn't the same as what Sophie had gone through, witnessing it happen right in front of her. But I knew the hollow ache that followed, the way grief could sneak up and knock the wind out of you on an ordinary day. My grandfather passed from cancer a few years back, I shared, surprising myself. I didn't usually open up like this. It was slow, drawn out. I wasn't there when it happened, but the guilt, wondering if I could have done more, it sticks with you. Ellen reached across the table, her hand covering mine for a brief moment. Then you get it. Sophie mentioned you once or twice. Said you're one of the few at work who doesn't treat her like she's fragile, doesn't pry with fake concern. That means more than you know. I felt a flush of something, embarrassment, gratitude. She's tough. She hides it well. But she shouldn't have to, Ellen said, her voice cracking. She stood up, disappearing into the living room for a moment before returning with a small framed photo. It showed a younger Sophie, maybe 10 years old, grinning ear to ear beside a man with the same warm eyes, both holding fishing poles by a serene lake. This was her and her dad. They were so close. He'd take her out every summer. Now, she won't even look at these pictures. She handed it to me, and I held it carefully like it was fragile glass. She's lucky to have you, I said, and I'll keep an eye on her at work, if that's okay. Ellen wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. More than okay, just be there. Sometimes that's all anyone needs. We finished our coffee in companionable silence after that. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door, hugging me quickly, a mother's hug, full of unspoken thanks. Drive safe, Ryan, and Merry Christmas. You too, Ellen. As I stepped out into the snowy night, the cold air hit me like a wake-up call. My car was parked under a street lamp, flakes accumulating on the windshield. I got in, started the engine, and sat there for a minute, staring at the photo she'd let me keep a copy of. Slipped into my pocket as a reminder. The weight of what I'd learned settled over me like a heavy blanket. Sophie wasn't just a coworker anymore. She was someone carrying a wound I could never fully understand, but one I couldn't ignore. Driving home through the quiet streets, I realized that sometimes a simple act of kindness opens doors you never knew existed. And once they're open, there's no going back. The next day dragged on like molasses. I woke up earlier than usual, my mind replaying the events of the night before in a loop. The warmth of Ellen's kitchen, the photo in my pocket, Sophie's tear-streaked face as she slept on the sofa. Work felt surreal. The office buzzed with post-party chatter, people sharing blurry photos and laughing about who danced the worst. But Sophie's desk sat empty, her computer screen dark, the usual clutter of sticky notes and coffee mugs absent. An out-of-office auto-reply popped up when I emailed her about a minor project update. No one else seemed to notice or care. To them, it was just another sick day or personal time off. I tried to focus on my calls, pitching software solutions to uninterested clients, but my thoughts kept drifting back. Had I overstepped by staying and talking to her mom? Would Sophie be mortified that I'd seen her at her lowest, heard the raw details of her grief? The last thing I wanted was to make things awkward between us at work. We weren't friends, not really, just colleagues who occasionally shared a laugh over bad coffee. But now I knew too much, and that knowledge sat heavy in my chest like an uninvited guest. By midday, I was second-guessing everything. I picked up my phone a dozen times, drafting messages only to delete them. Hey, hope you're feeling better? Too casual. If you need to talk, too pushy. Finally, I settled on something simple, neutral. If you want to grab coffee or just go for a walk sometime, let me know. No pressure to talk about anything. I hit send before I could overthink it further, then shoved my phone in my drawer and tried to bury myself in emails. The afternoon stretched on and I half expected radio silence. But around 4 p.m. as I was packing up, my phone buzzed. It was Sophie. Thanks for last night, really. Thank you so much. Short, but it eased the knot in my stomach. At least she wasn't avoiding me entirely. The following morning, she was back at her desk when I arrived. She looked put together, hair tied back, fresh makeup, typing away like nothing had happened. But there were shadows under her eyes, a subtle fatigue that hadn't been there before, or maybe I'd just never noticed. She caught my eye as I passed by, and after a beat, she stood up and approached my cubicle. Her hands fidgeted with a pen, clicking it open and closed, a nervous tick I'd seen her do during stressful meetings. Ryan, she started, her voice low enough that no one else could overhear. About the other night. Mom wants to know if you can come over for dinner tonight. She insists on thanking you properly, and I'd like to talk too, if you're free. I blinked, surprised but not unwilling. Yeah, sure, I'd like that. She gave a small nod, relief flickering across her face. Great, around 7? I'll text you the address again, just in case. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and reports, but my mind was elsewhere. When evening came, I stopped at a corner store on the way, picking up a modest bottle of red wine and a bouquet of winter flowers. Nothing extravagant, just a gesture. The drive to West Seattle felt shorter this time, the streets familiar under the streetlights. I pulled up to the house on Maple Street, the same warm glow spilling from the windows, and knocked. Ellen answered, her face lighting up with a genuine smile. Ryan, come in, come in. It's so good to see you again. She took the wine and flowers with thanks, ushering me inside. The house smelled like roasting garlic and herbs, comfort food simmering on the stove. Sophie emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron, her expression a mix of gratitude and slight embarrassment. Dinner's almost ready, she said. Mom made her famous salmon bake. Hope you're hungry. We sat around the small dining table, the three of us, with plates of salmon, roasted vegetables, and fresh bread. At first, the conversation was light. Work anecdotes, the unusually cold weather, a funny story about a neighbor's over-the-top holiday lights. But as the meal progressed, the tone shifted. Ellen glanced at Sophie, who nodded subtly, and then turned to me. We were talking about Dad last night, Sophie said quietly, setting down her fork. Mom thought maybe sharing some memories would help, if that's okay. I nodded, sensing this was their way of including me, of testing the waters. Ellen started with a story about how Sophie's father had taught her to fish on summer weekends at a nearby lake. Patient hours casting lines, packing picnics, laughing when they caught nothing but weeds. Sophie chimed in with her own recollection. The time he'd surprised her with a puppy for her 10th birthday, or how he'd stay up late helping with homework, even when he was exhausted from his job as a mechanic. There were laughs, but also pauses where the silence grew thick. Sophie's eyes glistened at one point. and she excused herself briefly to the kitchen, returning with composed resolve. It's hard, she admitted, sitting back down. Talking about him, but it feels good too, like he's still here in some way. After dinner, as Ellen cleared the plates, Sophie suggested we step out to the front porch. The night air was crisp, snowflakes still drifting lazily. We sat on the steps, bundled in coats, the street quiet except for the distant hum of traffic. I wanted to thank you properly, Sophie said, her breath visible in the cold. For not just dropping me off and leaving. For staying with Mom. She told me what you two talked about. I shrugged. It was nothing. I'm glad I could help. She turned to me, her expression earnest. It wasn't nothing. I've been drowning, Ryan. Since Dad died, it's like I'm going through the motions, but inside it's all numb. Work helps distract me, but nights like the party, it catches up. I thought about ending it sometimes, just to make the pain stop. But I can't do that to Mom. Her words hung heavy between us, raw and unfiltered. I didn't interrupt, just listened as she poured it out. The guilt of not saving him, the emptiness of the house without his laughter, the fear that she'd never feel whole again. When she finished, tears streaming down her cheeks, I put an arm around her shoulders. You're not weak for feeling that way, I said. You're human. And pain like that, it doesn't have to be carried alone. She leaned into me just for a moment, then pulled back with a shaky smile. Thanks for listening. Really, that night, as I drove home, I knew I'd made a choice. Not out of obligation, but because something in me recognized her pain, mirrored my own buried grief. We weren't just colleagues anymore. This was the start of something deeper, a quiet commitment to be there, to not walk away when things got hard. Little by little, I was choosing to stay. As winter wore on, the days blurred into a routine of gray skies and early sunsets, but something subtle shifted in Sophie. She started showing up to work more consistently, her desk no longer a ghost town of unanswered emails. At first, it was small things. I'd catch her in the break room, chatting with a couple of colleagues about weekend plans or the latest office gossip. She joined group lunches occasionally, her laughter tentative but genuine, not the forced kind I'd seen before. In meetings, she spoke up more, offering ideas on system upgrades or troubleshooting protocols without that haunted look in her eyes. She wasn't fixed. Grief doesn't work that way. But she was emerging, like someone testing the waters after a long, cold swim. I kept my distance at first, not wanting to crowd her. We'd exchange nods in the hallway or quick hellos by the coffee machine, but I didn't push for more. The night I'd driven her home and talked with Ellen lingered between us, an unspoken bridge we both knew was there but weren't ready to cross fully. Then, one Friday evening as the office emptied out, my phone buzzed with a text from her. Up for a beer after work? There's something I want to run by you. I met her at a quiet pub a few blocks away, the kind with worn wooden booths and a jukebox playing old rock tunes. Sophie was already there, nursing a pint, looking more composed than I'd seen her in months. She waved me over, and as I slid into the seat across from her, she pulled a folded piece of paper from her bag and slid it toward me. It's an application, she said, her voice steady but with a hint of nervousness. For a grief support group. Meets weekly downtown. I've been staring at it for weeks, filling it out, then chickening out, but I think I'm ready to try. I unfolded the form, scanning the details, times, location, a brief description about sharing experiences with others who'd lost loved ones. This is huge, Sophie, I said, meeting her eyes. Admitting you need that space. It's brave. Most people never get there. She traced the rim of her glass with her finger. I wouldn't have even considered it without you. That night you brought me home and everything Mom told you. It made me realize I've been pretending too hard, acting like I'm okay when I'm not. You've been there without making me feel like a project or something to fix, just present. Her words caught me off guard, a warmth spreading in my chest. I'm glad, I replied. Really. If you want company for the first meeting or whatever, I'm here. We clinked glasses and the conversation flowed easier after that. She talked about how the support group idea had come from a pamphlet Ellen had left on the kitchen table, subtle but persistent. For the first time, Sophie opened up about the nightmares, the ones where she relived finding her dad on the porch, her hands shaking as she dialed 911. I shared more about my grandfather, how his slow decline had left me with a lingering fear of hospitals, the smell of antiseptic still turning my stomach years later. It wasn't a therapy session, just two people swapping fragments of their scars over drinks. By the end of the night, as we walked out into the chilly air, Sophie hugged me quickly. "Thanks for not running," she said with a half smile. From there, our connection deepened without fanfare. We'd grab coffee after work sometimes, or I'd swing by her house on weekends to help Ellen with small tasks, fixing a leaky faucet, stringing up new holiday lights that had been sitting in a box since December. Sophie started attending the group meetings, coming back with stories of others' losses that mirrored her own, making her feel less isolated. "It's weird," she told me once over lunch. "Hearing people say the exact things I've thought but never voiced. It helps." As spring crept in, melting the last of the snow and coaxing buds from the trees, Sophie suggested a day trip. "Let's go fishing," she said one Saturday morning via text. "Up at Lake Washington. Mom's packing a picnic. You in?" I was. We met at her house, Ellen handing over a cooler filled with sandwiches, fruit, and thermoses of hot coffee. "You two have fun," she said, waving us off with a knowing smile. The drive north was peaceful, the highway winding through evergreen forests dusted with fresh green. At the lake, we rented a small boat, the water calm and mirror-like under a pale blue sky. Sophie handled the rods with practiced ease, baiting hooks and casting lines just like her dad had taught her. We floated in silence for a while, the only sounds the gentle lap of water against the hull and distant birdsong. Then Sophie reeled in a small trout, holding it up with a triumphant grin. "First catch of the day," she announced. As she released it back into the water, her expression softened. "This place, it used to hurt coming here. All the memories of Dad, but today it feels peaceful, like he's not gone, just elsewhere." I nodded, not needing to fill the moment with words. The sun warmed our faces, and for the first time I saw Sophie truly relax. No tension in her shoulders, no guarded look in her eyes. We spent the afternoon like that, catching a few more fish, sharing the picnic, talking about nothing and everything. On the way home, she turned to me in the car. "You've given me space to breathe again, Ryan. I don't know how to repay that." "You don't have to," I said. "That's what friends do." Over the following weeks, the changes became more evident. Sophie dove into the support group with commitment, even volunteering to facilitate a session once. Ellen's smiles grew brighter. She'd call me occasionally just to chat, updating me on Sophie's progress or sharing a recipe. Our bond, mine and Sophie's, didn't need labels. It was a quiet understanding. When one of us had a rough day, the other was a text away. No expectations, no pressure. For her birthday in late spring, I planned something simple. I framed the photo from our fishing trip, the two of us on the boat, lake sparkling behind us, and wrote on the back, "Sometimes all someone needs is for one person to stay." I dropped it off at her house, wrapped in plain paper. When she opened it, her eyes welled up, but she laughed through the tears. "You get it," she said, hugging me tightly. "Thanks to you, I know no one has to face the pain alone. If you open the door, someone will walk through." That moment solidified it all, the slow, steady steps toward healing, the way our paths had intertwined not by chance, but by choice. A year slipped by like pages in a book I didn't want to finish reading. Sophie dove deeper into her support group, not just attending, but eventually sharing her story in ways that helped others too. She told me once, over coffee at a little spot near the office, how hearing echoes of her pain in strangers' voices made her feel connected again, less like an island adrift. Ellen's house on Maple Street transformed subtly. The once dim rooms now filled with more laughter, fresh flowers on the table, even a new coat of paint on the porch that I'd helped apply one sunny weekend. Ellen herself seemed lighter, her worries easing as she watched her daughter bloom back to life. She'd bake cookies and drop them off at my apartment sometimes, with notes saying things like, "For the man who reminded us we're not alone." Sophie and I, we weren't the kind who needed constant contact or grand gestures. Our friendship was quieter, more enduring, like a steady flame rather than a fireworks show. We'd meet for walks along the waterfront, where the Puget Sound lapped at the shore and seagulls wheeled overhead, talking about everything from work frustrations to dreams we'd shelved long ago. She opened up about the guilt that still crept in on quiet nights, the what-ifs that haunted her. What if she'd noticed her dad's fatigue sooner? What if she'd insisted on that doctor's visit? I'd listen, sharing my own lingering regrets about my grandfather, the calls I didn't make, the visits I postponed. It wasn't about fixing each other. It was about bearing witness, holding space for the messiness of healing. There were setbacks, of course. A rough anniversary hit Sophie hard one month, leaving her withdrawn and teary-eyed at work. She called me that evening, her voice small over the phone. "Can you come over? I don't want to be alone." I did, bringing takeout from her favorite Thai place. We sat on the living room floor, Ellen joining us with cups of tea, and let the silence be okay. No forced positivity, no platitudes, just presence. By the end of the night, as she hugged me goodbye, she whispered, "You're the reason I keep trying." For her birthday, which fell in the warming days of late spring, I wanted to mark how far she'd come. I framed that photo from our fishing trip, the two of us on the boat, the lake a shimmering backdrop, and inscribed on the back, "Sometimes all someone needs is for one person to stay." I presented it at a small gathering Ellen hosted in the backyard, string lights twinkling overhead as the sun dipped low. Sophie's eyes filled when she read the note, but her smile was radiant. "You get it," she said, pulling me into a hug. "Because of you, I learned that no one has to face the darkness solo. Open the door and someone will step through." Walking home that night, the streets alive with the hum of evening traffic and the scent of blooming jasmine, I felt a profound lightness. I hadn't saved Sophie or Ellen. They'd done the hard work themselves. I'd simply chosen to stay, to show up when walking away would have been easier. And in doing so, I'd healed parts of myself I hadn't even realized were fractured. My own isolation, the quiet loneliness that had shadowed me for years, faded in the warmth of this unexpected bond. Now, as the seasons cycle onward, Sophie and I remain friends. Not the kind that fade with time, but the ones forged in vulnerability. We don't see each other every day, but when life gets heavy, a text or call bridges the gap. Ellen sends holiday cards, and I've become a fixture at their table for occasional dinners. The house on Maple Street isn't empty anymore. It's a place of quiet strength, a reminder that grief doesn't define us, it reshapes us if we let it. Looking back that one night, stopping at the bar, driving through the snow, knocking on a door seemed so ordinary. But in daring to pause, to listen, to not turn away, it became something extraordinary. Sometimes the greatest miracles aren't loud or flashy. They're the simple act of staying, of choosing connection over convenience. And in that choice, we find the strength to keep going, to live fully again.